Alright, let's go over the meridian lines of the body and the energy flow. Now firstly, I'm going to cover underground water channels. We have first a topsoil layer, which is where all the grass and such grows. Then we have the layer of soil. So here we have kind of the vegetation. And then we have the soil. Then we have the clay layer. Clay. And then usually we have something like a sand layer. You can also have a rock layer. Just put bedrock under it. So here is bedrock. This is what you'd more mine. Now this will have is a sand layer. Now what happens is that water underground will usually try to find the sand layer here. Now the water, instead of just say the earth and then some kind of pool underground or a tube, for example, potentially there might be, underground areas where the water is so strong that it just flows through and it's just an area of water. But from what I've seen, usually if you were digging a well, for example, it runs through this sand. Now what happens if you have a topsoil that is so steeped down so that the topsoil kind of there, vegetation on top, then we have the clay, then we have the sand layer, and finally a bedrock underneath. So rock, jaggy rock and sand, looks like that, clay, pieces of clay, whatever, and then just topsoil, right? The water runs through the sand and builds up, and it forms into like a lake or a basin of water. Do you understand what I mean by that? If it was dirt underneath here, which of course is like, there's layers of, dirt, and it has its own layers within layers, so to speak. But if it didn't have that bedrock to hold it, and if it didn't have, some kind of really thick, dense earthy material, it wouldn't really form into some kind of basin of water. So for example, you could put a well on top of it. Isn't that nice? There we go. Put a little bucket in there, and you scoop up your water. Inside the body, you also have this. Your flesh is similar to this sand where water can penetrate it, like the muscle. The bedrock is more like the bone. And I guess the top layers again is kind of like the skin. So within your body you have this flow of water, not just the flow of blood and the flow of something like cerebral spinal fluid and lymph and other things. You have the flow of like a kind of bodily fluid, which as they say, we're mainly water, I guess you could say, but it's not quite water in the way you might think. So this water, of course, carries nutrients, it carries heat, it carries air, it carries energy within it. There are also, FYI, for people interested in more alchemical things, there are also vapor channels running under the earth, supposedly. That's where you get the idea of cave gas. A cave filling up with, instead of water, like a mine shaft filling up, instead of water, it fills up with cave gas. Just a little interesting thing. Now, how about the body? Okay, 1 second. Now the body is similar. For example, draw a little person here. This is a front view, and we'll also draw a side view of this person facing this one. excuse me 1 second. Yeah, it looks, oops, a little bit too big there. It looks good enough for now. Right, so within your body, you have there are two major channels. There is the, starting from the root or the anus, there is a governor channel, which goes to about the tongue, or the roof of the mouth, and then from like the tongue, there's the conception vessel. Technically, these are called the vessels: governor vessel, conception vessel. In front of the body, it kind of look like this, reaching down to the root. If we had a back view of the body, back running through like that, starting from there, and then it goes to about there, at least the back channel. Front channel, it goes to about there. So we have these channels running through the body. Now, these they give kind of a highway, an energetic highway to tell your body where to channel things. So the energy directs, we have the elements, we have heat, so energy at the top, chi channels heat, channels air pressure, channels liquids channels solids, there we are. So this kind of directs the flow, so to speak, of these things in the body. Now, the front, let's just put this person in half. The front channel, the conception vessel, or the CV, GV. You can look these up if you want a more precise diagram. Directs more the organs, the bladder, the internal reproductive organ, the intestines and guts, the heart, the brain, for example, and the lungs, I guess we'll just put there as well. It directs the pressures of these. So if one of them fills up with too much pressure, it'll direct it down or up. That's why you can direct energy up by focusing on it in a higher point. You can focus at the top of your head, you can focus on the brain, you can focus on the chest, the lower chest, the belly, etc., the lower belly, and the root and such. And you will either go up or down depending, and if you focus on a specific point like the bladder or the heart, you will stimulate the energies and the fluids and the heat and the air and the solids, etc., and the actual organ. Can't think the organ's like the solid of that point, right? So you're focusing there, which taps you into the energy, and the energy taps you into the matter and all the other things below it. The focusing there stimulates what we call substance. So energy will just do focus, which is kind of related to these because they're more spiritual, and then we have substance. This is the word that I'm using to kind of link in, to some extent, all of these, but it kind of cuts off the air, so to speak, because the heat is so focused with the energy. The air is semi-focused with the energy. It can also be grouped between these. But the substance, the idea of a physical substance, some kind of a liquidy thing within the body, full of like salts and hormones and whatever else. Like the substance of the liver, is like bile. Maybe you could think the substance of the heart is blood. The bladder is urine, for example. The internal reproductive region is reproductive fluids. So this is how the flow of these things happen, because you can have a full organ, an organ kind of full, and if it's too full, it'll try to naturally channel up or down. This is why when you're sleeping, you don't piss yourself or shit yourself, excuse my language, because you're somewhat channeling up or down. But the denser, when we get denser to like the bowel and the bladder, it's slower to transmute up or down. The upper ones is easier to transmute up or down. Yeah. Now the back channel is what I believe its physical counterpart is actually the spine. Now the flow, I've noticed, is counterclockwise. You can change the flow, of course, but I think that usually it's kind of counterclockwise. So usually it's like a rushing river flowing down the body to the root. When it hits the root, it transmutes up to the brain. This is Kundalini. The Kundalini. And they say the Kundalini is in the base of the spine at GV1. That's GV1. So from that point of GV1, which is kind of in between the anal region and the base of the spine, you can also have just the spinal, what do you call it, the tailbone region. That energy rises up, and it is the cerebrospinal fluid that is its substance. The substance, the front ones, is more blood. You could say blood is one of them. Nutrients, minerals, vitamins, actual fluid, actual liquid. Excuse me. So you can do the microcosmic orbit, which is where you just focus on, kind of start at the lower belly, and then you focus down, and you back up the spine, up the shoulders, up the brain, top of the head, down here, and you touch the tongue to the roof of the mouth. You kind of do like the whole tongue, the back of the tongue, the front of the tongue. You put the whole thing up there, and then it goes back down again, and up the back and down. You can do that exercise if you want to play with that. You can also do it the opposite way. You can go, down the spine and up to the front and down the spine. It's it feels a bit strange, but you can do that if you want practice, if you want to try it. So, an interesting topic is on sexual transmutation. There's like tantric sex, Taoist sex, etc. Why is it that monks, priests, even apparently shrine maidens, all of them, had to, nuns, etc., had to practice, usually had to practice abstinence, had to take a vow of chastity? Why is this? Well, as I stated in the past energy cultivation video, the sexual fluids, the kind of the base root area, relates to the throat, but also the top of the head and the head in general, because of course the portal to heaven, the gateway to heaven, so to speak, is the throat. Of course, you've got an upper portal to the white dimension, the infinity, which is at the top of the head. But if this is not functioning well, if this is not full of energy, then you can't have the upper regions full of energy as well. So they weren't able to do their magical ceremonies and practices if they didn't have lower energies. Now, if you've read Mantak Chia's book, he talks about, if you're looking up Mantak Chia, he talks about the transmutation of the sexual energy through the spine, through raising it up to the top of the head. Now, Do you want to do that? That's the question. I'll talk about that. You can do that, as I stated. Now, what happens when through abstinence, the prostate region for men and the testicles, as well as the ovaries for women, and the womb region, which is the prostate equivalent, will fill up, as well as, you know, seminal vesicles and some other things, will fill up, this region will fill up full of substance. And if you focus there, you stimulate that substance, and it loosens it and starts to, you know, go into the bloodstream and such, and, you know, nourish your body and all that. But if you focus too much, or you have too much, or through sexual activity, this area collects more and more fluid. So what happens when a man or woman either engages in sex or in masturbation is that they are stimulating this internal reproductive center, and eventually it has either too much fluid, too much substance, where this is the region, it builds and builds and builds and builds, and it pushes against the walls and it swells. And if the person cannot handle that, then they orgasm or ejaculate fluid. They release this substance and they lose it. And now the body has to take the upper energies in the brain to go back down and to nourish it. Of course, all of the organ energies, the heart energy, the lungs, the lung energy, the heart energy, you know, the kidneys especially, and the gut, what you eat, etc. It goes down to nourish this. And I'm not saying to never orgasm, to never come. I don't think that's healthy to never do that, but you have to realize what is going on. And then when you realize it in your own body, you can realize, you know, how much you can do it, how much you shouldn't, and to better control these things. So in Mantak Cheers, what he suggests is that when you stimulate this area, and you can stimulate by focusing on it, similarly a person who has sexual issues, where, you know, for a woman usually it's they can't get aroused and they can't get, you know, lubricated, and for a man, if he can't get, again, aroused, which is the spiritual part, or if he can't get hard, you can focus on this, you know, the area in here within the perineal region. Find the area for your man or woman, either the womb or the kind of prostate region, and it'll stimulate, you know, if it's empty, this is like, just say that, you know, how much substance you have in there, you focus, which stimulates energy. All of the nutrients come in, gets bigger and bigger, and builds it up. Now, if you, for example, wish to practice a transmutative form of sexual practices, as it fills, in Mantak Chia's book, now I'm going to talk about the next version next, but if you want to understand the Mantak Chia version, he says to draw it up the back of the spine into the brain. Now this will again take this energy, it'll shrink it down, and take the energy from there, but also the substance, because again, any substance in your body can transmute into any other substance. Bones essentially can transmute into anything, the muscles can transmute into anything. That's why you can kind of live off, you know, fasting, because you can transmute all your matters, and of course, if you don't have enough internal energy, then you're going to lose a lot of weight, lose a lot of muscle mass, and all by bone density and all that. But going on, so draws it up the spine to the head. Now, what you can do is simply just focus on the head. Where you focus in the body is where all of the other energies of the organs and the centers and the meridians will start to travel up. He says that you should, you know, draw it up slowly. Now you can do this, but it's not really, you know, I don't think it's a very, you know, I think it's a bit overcomplication. Instead, you just focus on a region. You basically create a pressure vacuum within the body that draws it up there. Now, that's kind of spiritual cultivation for this. It's more yang. Another way you can do it is actually to focus around the anus region and the bowel, the kind of lower bowel region here. So kind of behind or under the sexual center. If you focus there, again, same thing, you lose the energy, you transmute the energy and it transmutes into the earth element. Right? So this is more physical cultivation as opposed to spiritual or mental. And whatever you do is up to you. You can focus at the heart. If you want more blood, you can focus at the guts. If you want more inner fire and such, and inner power. But what I'm trying to say is that you can transmute this anywhere, and you can also run it through the whole body. Now, it's not just sexual practices. It's also if you eat food. You can eat food and you can also transmute it through or you can run it through the lines of the body. Of course, you also have an internal line, the central pillar, and you have an internal line on the legs and the arms, as I've drawn here. Kind of like the bone line, you can think. You also have lines across in front of the body, kind of. If you look up the meridians, you'll see a diagram of this. Similarly, the air, breathing gives you a lot of air element in the body, a lot of air pressure. You can breathe from the lungs, breathe, and run it through the pressure, run the pressure through the limbs of the body, or run it through to the head, or run it through to the internal organ region. You can do this with any center, any element. If you drink a lot of water, you can, again, channel the water through your body. The brain is the controller of the energy, the focus center. By feeling and focusing through the body, you are actually using the head, so to speak, or through visualizing. Again, if you want to imagine like blue light or white light or black light, black is grounding, it's not a bad color. White is stimulating, it's energizing, it's daytime. Again, the same way I've said, you don't have to just transmute your energy to the head. You can transmute it to the bowel region. If you lack stability, if you lack things like finances, if you lack things like, good health and if you have like a feeling of doom, that's a bad one. Man, I drew this kitty up high, I should draw them lower. If you have that kind of stuff going on, then you want to focus more on the earth element. But what I'm trying to say is the same way that if you breathe in air and you circulate it, you're using this upper chest region to do that. If you focus on the heart and then you feel the veins within you, which are channels. They're a blood channel instead of an energy channel or a water channel or something. You can then circulate the blood through. I'm feeling it right now. I can feel my veins starting to, pop out and activate. Similarly, if you focus on the brain, that is the ultra speed highway. That's the nervous system. You're feeling out the nerves of the body. And that is the yang, the white energy of the body. This is the quickest way to feel everything in your body, which is why I think it's a good reason to use focus instead of, personally at least I like focus. You can also use the lowest sense of just pure physical tension, kind of running tension through the body. That's another form of cultivation. We focus essentially on the bowels, and you run that you feel all the muscles and you feel the contraction of the body. Of course, you don't want to do it too much unless you know how to handle that physical earthly energy. But these are the different forms of energies in the body relating to the organs and relating to the elements. And it is how you circulate the substance and the energies in the body. And they run through, or the energy specifically runs through these channels. This is spine and the front. And if one's overflowing, it will run down or up, or wherever you focus, wherever you, depending on what you're doing, will depend on how the energies and substances of the body transmute. Anyway, I hope that was interesting to you and you learned something. Of course, practice this stuff to really understand it. And of course, check the links in the description if you're interested in social and commercial stuff, and have a nice day.